Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking All Sports. And in this week's episode, we've got quite a few things to talk about in the world of sport. A lot of end of season drama happening, more AFL action, and also State of Origin to talk about as well. Probably the greatest Australian rivalry in sports at the moment. So without further ado, let's get stuck into it. We're going to kick things off before the week in review with some world football action going on. We'll start with the Premier League as we had the final day over the weekend. Crystal Palace had a 1-1 draw with Nottingham Forest to finish out their season. Aston Villa knocking off Brighton 2-1 saw them finish in the top 7, which means they will be playing in the Conference League next season. Brighton will be playing Europa League, and because of that victory, Tottenham weren't able to finish inside the European stage for the first time in a couple of years now. Man United, they knocked off Fulham 2-1. Southampton and Liverpool had a thrilling 4-4 draw to end out their season over at St Mary's. Southampton obviously going down, finishing rock bottom last this season. Chelsea and Newcastle had a 1-1 draw, and it's a bit interesting. Those two teams had very different seasons. Newcastle will be very happy they qualified for Champions League. Chelsea finished mid-table. Very interesting. Arsenal knocked off Wolves 5-0 in the biggest victory over the weekend. Brentford, they knocked off Man City 1-0 at home, and then into the relegation battle. That's what all the eyes were on over the weekend. Leeds, they lost to Spurs 4-1, which saw them definitely going down. And then it was down to two teams, Everton and Leicester, which one could stay up. Leicester did all they could, did everything that they could to try and stay up by knocking off West Ham at home 2-1. However, Everton were able to beat Bournemouth thanks to a fantastic strike from Doucouré, who was able to fire Everton out of the relegation area. Hate to be with the puns there, but had to do it. And the Toffees, again, survive relegation, and they will stay up for another season in the Premier League. That confirms that Leeds United, Leicester City, and Southampton all going down. And within 7 years of winning a Premier League title, Leicester City have gone down. It felt like yesterday, 2016, when they went on that incredible run and were able to shock the world in one of the more surprising Premier League title victories in the Premier League's history. And now they're back down to the Championship. But that's all that happened in the Premier League. We've got the teams confirmed for European football next season, which includes Man City, Arsenal, Newcastle United, Manchester United, Liverpool, Brighton, and Aston Villa. And then obviously, as I said before, the teams that got relegated. And with the teams coming up, we've got Burnley coming back up, Sheffield United back up, and then Luton Town after they knocked off Coventry City in the playoff final. Just have a look at their stadium and you'll see why it is remarkable that they are up in the Premier League back into the Premier League, for the first time in 30 plus years. Now we're going to get stuck into some NBA action as we had a Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals between the Boston Celtics and the Miami Heat. The Celtics were down 3-0 in this series and looked to be the first team in 150 attempts to come back from 3-0 down in a playoff series. Unfortunately for them, they were the 151st victim to not make a comeback from 3-0 down, as Miami Heat, in a blowout victory in Game 7 in Boston, were able to wrap up the series and send themselves into their second NBA Finals series in the last 3 years. Obviously, the last one that they were in was against the Lakers in the bubble. They will not be playing the Lakers this time. Instead, they are playing the team that knocked them out in the Western Conference Finals, the Denver Nuggets, who are making their first NBA Finals appearance. Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Nikola Jokic, Kyle Lowry, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray. Stars all across the board for this NBA Finals. Let me know in the comments who you think's going to win and in how many games, and who's going to be the 2022-23 NBA Finals MVP. Let me know all your predictions in the comments. I think we're in for an absolute thriller of a series. And back to Boston for a second. Does this mean Tatum and Brown have to go their separate ways? I think if Boston were to make a decision to cut one of them, it's definitely going to be Jaylen Brown, not Jason Tatum. But do Boston do that? Do they try and get some value out of Jaylen Brown and get some better help around Tatum? Or do they commit to this and, just like the Sixers, trust the process and keep committing and backing in these two to get them to the pointy end again? What have you just remember last season they made the NBA Finals and got knocked off to a great Golden State Warriors team, and they just lost in the Eastern Conference Final to the team that they beat last year in the Eastern Conference Final. So I don't know. I personally would keep Jaylen Brown, keep committing. It's obviously working. It's just a little mental things, and they weren't too great this playoffs, Boston. But hey, who knows what the NBA world will come up with, and who knows what the Celtics are going to do. But let me know what you think, if they should split up or they should stay together. Now we're going to be talking about some State of Origin action in the NRL as the Queensland Maroons took out Game 1 of the 3-game series against New South Wales, winning 26-18 in a thriller in Adelaide at Adelaide Oval. 48,000 packed out a footy/cricket stadium for a State of Origin game. It just goes to show how popular State of Origin is in this country. Fantastic win for the Queensland Maroons. On paper, New South Wales looked exquisite, but they weren't able to produce that consistently enough in this game. Queensland getting off to a hot start, leading 10-0, and before the Blues were able to respond, gain ascendancy, get in front, and then go tit for tat with the Maroons. Queensland got back in front, New South Wales went back in front, Queensland got back in front again, and then Cam Munster, a defensive breakdown from the Blues, saw Munster seal the deal for the Maroons late and has them up 1-0 in the 3-game series. The next game will be in Queensland, and the Maroons will look to sweep the Blues and win that one. And then the third game, if the Blues were to beat Queensland, the decider will be in New South Wales, which will be epic. So Game 1 to the Maroons, they lead 1-0 after a great 26-18 victory. Now we're going to be talking about some AFL action that happened over the weekend. It was round 11 and we've got a bit to cover. It was the round of upsets. We had so many upsets. I think majority of tipsters only got 4 or 5 tips right over the weekend. We had quite a few. I mean, Sydney over Carlton with the injury list they've got. That was an upset. Freo knocking off Melbourne. Hawthorn knocking off St Kilda. The Giants going down to the Cattery and beating Geelong. That's their 3rd time in a row that they've beaten Geelong at GMHBA Stadium, which is absolutely fantastic for the Giants. The Gold Coast Suns getting over a red-hot Western Bulldogs side. Tops off all the upsets over the weekend, but I think one of the bigger ones as well, the Crows in the final game, knocking off Brisbane in some style. I think Brisbane kicked themselves out of that game, but Adelaide, credit to them, had to bounce back after a disappointing performance against the Dogs in Ballarat, and were able to do so in style in some tough conditions. 5 games, by the way, were decided by 10 points or less. Just goes to show how good of a round and how entertaining it was. A lot of close games. Who's a contender and who's a pretender? Let me know in the comments. I feel as though that round probably could have made it a bit more clearer as to which teams we are definitely confident on will be challenging for the flag at the end of the season, or which teams are going to be looking at rebuilding and looking to the draft and the trade table as early as now, as their seasons are probably finished. Let me know in the comments which teams you'd put in each category. I'd be very curious to see what you guys think, because I think it is very hotly debated. I think you could have great arguments as to why some teams are definitely contenders, and then for that same team, great arguments to say that they're not going to get close. That's how even the season is. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. Now we're going to be getting stuck into the teams who impressed me the most, and we're going to start off with those Hawthorn Hawks. The last 2 weeks, they've been absolutely fantastic, and especially on the weekend when the game looks dead and buried, looked like the Saints were home. They were able to kick 5 unanswered goals to storm home to a 10-point victory over the Saints at Marvel Stadium in a fantastic, famous victory for this young team. That's now their 3rd win on the season. The Hawks are looking good. This is a young team, like I said earlier, that are going to be really good, and you have to commit with them. They're not tanking, obviously. I think they've shown that the last 2 weeks, but I'm very happy for the Hawks, who have been playing really good football, very competitive in most weeks, and recently starting to get reward for their efforts. I think Sam Mitchell's doing a fantastic job with these young players. He's got them playing a really good game style, and it's got a very good culture going on there as well for the Hawks at the moment. The next team who is included in the most impressed for the week, I got to give it to the Crows. I was really confident. I thought the Brisbane were going to go down there and get the job done, but Adelaide, fair credit and fair play to them. I mean, bad kicking equals bad footy, so we can't say necessarily that Brisbane probably should have, Adelaide weren't good. Adelaide were great. They were able to put themselves in a position to win that game. due to the opportunity they were given by Brisbane, who weren't able to kick straight. So fair play in tough conditions as the underdog. Well done to the Crows, who did look really good in the wet, I might add. A very scary team, and that's one of the teams that I think a lot of people are going to struggle to be putting into either contender or pretender at the moment. We've seen some very good stuff from the Crows, but we've also seen some very bad stuff. It's going to be interesting in the next few weeks how they go. It's such a young team. I know Darren Burgess is their fitness coach, so fitness-wise they should be fine, but it'll be interesting to see if this game style is going to continue to hold up as it is right now. But for now, they definitely deserve to be in the most impressed category. And the last team that goes into the most impressed for this week is probably the team who struck up the biggest upset of the round. That's the Giants, who knocked off the Cats in Geelong. They were fantastic. This team has been very plucky for the last few weeks now. Could have easily won games that they were, unfortunately for them, were lost. Could have easily knocked off the Saints the week before. I think the game against Brisbane Lions, they were able to claw their way back from 40 points down and make it a very respectable result. They've been very, very competitive under Adam Kingsley and have not looked like a bottom 4 team this season. It feels like, though, that they're probably going to be the team that finishes there by default, which will probably be really stiff on them. However, I can definitely see them not finishing there because of how well they've been competing. I'm worried for the back end of the season, though, that the Giants might take a dip now. Maybe the fitness is going to start coming in to fruition for them, where it hurts them and they get really tired because, remember, it is a very long season. But for what they're showing now and what they did on the weekend in Toby Green's 200th game was very, very good from the Giants and definitely deserve to be in the most impressed. Now to kick off the most disappointed, we're going to start off with the Saints. That's a very bad performance. And I think for a lot of people in the AFL world, that's a performance that are going to write off the Saints now for the rest of the season. To put it simply, they should have won that game. I mean, 3 goals up late in that last quarter and you let Hawthorn have absolute dominance over you and kick 5 of the last 5 goals to win the game. It's pretty disappointing, especially for a team that is looking to bounce back and jump back into the finals this season after having 2 underwhelming seasons. Ross Lyon would be very, very disappointed. I think he has to go from nice cuddly Ross now to really angry Ross the Boss style and try and get stuck into these players, because a poor performance against the Crows, they backed it up, yes, with a gritty win over the Giants, but they weren't too impressive. And then weren't able to get the job done at home against the Hawks. Max King, by the way, just a highlight, has looked very good in his first 2 weeks back. Great to see him back from that injury that he sustained in the preseason. But for the Saints, they have to go on the most disappointed for this week and need to bounce back in style in the next coming weeks. The next team in the most disappointed has to go to the Dogs. They were red hot, and I was all on them. I had them penciled in to be in that top 4 position on the power rankings at the moment if they were to knock off the Suns, but they couldn't get it done. I know it was tough conditions, but for most of that game, they were outplayed. They did kick the first 4 goals of the game and started off red hot. And when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, the Dogs they're barking, they're hounding, and they're letting everybody know they're here and they're ready to rumble this year inside premiership contention-wise. However, Gold Coast since then were able to just dominate and take control of the game and not really let the Dogs do much damage. They were able to charge home late and make it really, really close. But well done to the Suns, who were able to get the job done against the Bulldogs. And the Bulldogs, very disappointing with their performance on the weekend, and they definitely have to go into the most disappointed. And the final team in the most disappointed for another week, it is Carlton. It's disappointing that I have to put them here, but that performance against the Swans was just not good enough. I mean, on paper, and I know on paper things can change on field, on paper they should have won. Curnow and Mackay, that forward line against Sydney's back line that they had to field due to their injuries, they should have got the job done. There was a lot of turnovers defensively. They weren't set up well. Every time they turned it over, it looked like Wiedering and Newman were just under the pump unnecessarily as well. McGovern. It looked like at the start of the game they were using Saad's run-off half-back a lot more, which was very promising. And I was thinking, hey, this is good for the Blues, and this could probably kill the game early against the Swans. But that quickly died off, and Nick Blakey started to come alive for the Swans. And the Blues weren't able to stop that. And that's probably what the difference was in that game. Nick Blakey's run-off half-back. So very disappointed in Carlton. I've been very disappointed in them for the last few weeks because I keep tipping them and they just don't win. So there is so much upside in this team, so much potential, so much good things that they showed at the start of last season and at the beginning of this season. But unfortunately, it's becoming very inconsistent and things have to change. But for now, they have to be in the most disappointed. The Blues, they're in a rut at the moment and they really need to get themselves out of it. Now we're going to be looking at the round 11 AFL power rankings. And as you can see with the graphic coming up, the D's, they still hold fourth position, but they're lucky that the Dogs lost to the Suns or else they would be out of the top four. They are not in good form at the moment. Melbourne, Adelaide jumped both Sydney and St Kilda. They deserve to be in this top 8. Sydney hold their spot though with the win. The Saints drop even further down. The Bombers, they hold there as well, and Freo and Gold Coast are starting to get closer and closer to that top 8 contention and definitely get to be in that conversation for the top 8 teams in the league. Currently, Richmond fall further down the pecking order, and if the Giants were to knock them off this week, I think Richmond, purely by just how they're going and how the Giants are going, would have to fall into the bottom 4. But apart from that, not much else has changed, and that is the round 11 AFL power rankings. Now we're going to get stuck into this week's Star of the Week nominations. We've got 3 more to give out, and we've got some honourable mentions as well that deserve to be recognised and could have easily got in. Those honourable mentions include the likes of Jimmy Butler, Matt Rowell, Nick Blakey. That's just to name a few. But without further ado, let's get stuck into the first Star of the Week nomination, and that is Hawthorn's captain, James Sicily, who was absolutely mammoth. He was an absolute mammoth in their upset win over the Saints. He had 43 disposals for a key defender, which is remarkable. 16 marks, 658 metres gained, 11 score involvements, and 4 contested marks. He was fantastic in that Hawthorn win, like I said just then, and was a pivotal reason as to why the Hawks were able to get up. He is suspended, though, unfortunately for the Hawks, due to his hit on Caminiti that was high, so he'll miss their game against the Power this week. But it poses the question now, is he the All-Australian lock for fullback? I think he would have to definitely be in there. I mean, you've got players like Darcy Moore, Aliir, who are playing absolutely fantastic for their respective teams at the moment, but Sicily's got to be in consideration, and that would be a remarkable achievement for a team that's currently in the bottom 4 and most likely will finish around that direction. To be in the All-Australian, it shows how good of a season he has had. I think he should be in consideration, potentially a lock already, but definitely deserved a Star of the Week nomination. The next Star of the Week nomination goes to Tim Taranto, who was probably well overdue to get one. Sensational performance in a losing side. 33 disposals, 6 marks, kicked 4 goals, 1, and they only lost by 10 points. So imagine you take those goals away. It could have been a bit uglier for the Tigers. 7 clearances, 7 tackles, and 8 score involvements. He was Mr. Everywhere for Richmond. He's been a very good pickup as well for the Tigers. Remember, this is just his first 11 games with Richmond. He hasn't missed one. He's been absolutely fantastic for them. And I think it goes without saying it. I don't think it's up for debate. He's got to be the front runner for their BNF. I'm surprised a new recruit can impact a team this much, especially when a lot of people had Richmond being in premiership contention. But he has been way better than the rest of his teammates at the moment, and has been carrying Richmond for the majority of this season. So he is a definitely deserved winner of a Star of the Week nomination this week. And the final Star of the Week nomination goes to Jack Lukosius, who becomes only one of 3 players now to have multiple Star of the Week nominations. This is his second one now for the year. He was very classy in their 7-point win over the Dogs, and you take it, he kicked 5 goals straight, and they only won by 7 points. So you take Lukosius' efforts away, and they probably lose that game, Gold Coast. He had 9 score involvements as well, and had 12 touches, all at 100% disposal efficiency. So he was prolific for Gold Coast, and in tough conditions up in Darwin, where it's very hot and dewy, where your skills need to be great, Lukosius met that bar. Is he a smoky to win Star of the Year now? I know you got Dacos, you got Cameron, you got Bontempelli, you got Erling Haaland, you got some great names in there who are having phenomenal years. But that's twice now, so he's got to be in that consideration. But I'll tell you what's not up for debate, and that is he has a Star of the Week nomination this week. 5 goals, like I said before, straight. Probably the difference maker, besides the likes of Matt Rowell. 4 Gold Coast to win that game, and he deserves the Star of the Week nomination this week. Now we're going to have a little quick preview at the week ahead. We'll start off with some AFL action. Round 12 kicks off Friday night. Melbourne host Carlton. Gee, that's a big game. Melbourne losing their last 2 games and not looking too impressive, playing against the Blues, who have not been impressive for the last month. That is a massive game on Friday night, and I think all eyes will be on it. I'll be there, so that's a big one. A lot of pressure for both teams. Port Adelaide host the Hawks to kick off the Saturday games. Port Adelaide in ripping form, and so are the Hawks. So that'll be really interesting to watch over at Adelaide Oval. The Eagles host Collingwood in Perth for the Saturday twilight game. Dom Sheets' 150th game, and of course, it's against Collingwood. How fitting. The Dogs, they host the Cats in a game of the round contender on Saturday night at Marvel Stadium. That's going to be brilliant. Both teams coming off disappointing losses. It'll be interesting to see which one bounce back better. The Bulldogs, I know, get Treloar back this week, and Geelong still have injury issues. So it'll be interesting to see how those youngsters go up against some A-grade midfielders of the Dogs and A-grade players all over the park. And another game of the round contender is Gold Coast versus Adelaide. And I didn't think we'd be saying this at the start of the season over in Northern Territory. The Gold Coast are in good form, stringing some good performances together, but then sometimes some losses. But you never know what can happen in neutral territory, especially when it's up in the Northern Territory, where the conditions are very tough, and they're up against a hot and cold Adelaide team who are currently hot and are going up into hot conditions. That'll be one to watch on Saturday night. To kick off the Sunday games, you've got the Giants and the Tigers over in Sydney. That'll be very interesting to see how that plays. Adam Kingsley's first game as coach of the Giants against his former team that he coached recently, which was the Tigers, and it's not against Damien Hardwick. It's against his fellow assistant from the year prior with Richmond in Andrew McWalter. And to round out the round, a good rivalry that doesn't get spoken about enough, and that is Essendon hosting North Melbourne at Marvel Stadium. There's also some FA Cup final action this weekend. Manchester City playing against Manchester United at Wembley. Manchester derby to cap off the English football season, as it's the last major trophy for the season in the country before Man City will play in the Champions League final against Inter Milan in the upcoming weeks. That's this Saturday, though, the FA Cup final. Man City play Man United at Wembley. And that's all we've got time for on this week's episode of Talking All Sports. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments all your predictions for the NBA Finals, the FA Cup coming up, Round 12 AFL action, and let me know who you think in the AFL as well are pretenders and contenders. And let me know, thanks to the Maroons' win in the first game of the State of Origin, let me know who is going to win the State of Origin. Will the Blues peg 2 back, or will the Maroons be able to win the next one, or lose and then win the decider? So let me know in the comments all of your predictions. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next week.